Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be interviewing yet another member of the cast of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, the Dream Masters baby, Andras Jones, who played Rick, the Kung Fu expert. And I'm going to be talking to him today. He's also a podcaster slash radio host. He's got a show called Radio 8 Ball. And he's also into this thing that he briefed me about last night on the phone called Sync Movies, which I find very fascinating. We're going to talk about that today and talk about some of his other movies like the classic midnight movie Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-o-Rama, which he co-starred with Linnea, Brink, and Michelle. And I'm pretty excited about that. It's one of my all-time favorites. And yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty good show today. And also, he's a musician. Going to ask him about that as well. So here is my interview with Andras Jones.
Hello.
Hey, Andras, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I want to give you a little heads up. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm fine to do this. But if you feel like it's a little low energy and you are like, I think we could do better, then feel free. I can totally be available tomorrow or the next day. But but I know we've been trying to do this for a long time, and I've been difficult, so I'm not going to pull the plug on it. But it's up to you. If you're the host, you'll know.
Yeah, okay? I'll make it easy for you. Don't worry.
Cool.
Welcome to the show. It's such an honor, sir, and I appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, going back to the beginning, did you know early on you wanted to act and be a musician?
Yeah, I think so. I used to play it. I loved movies and I loved records when I was a kid, and I used to, pretend like I was have pretend bands where we'd be strumming on cardboard boxes and listening to K-Tel records, and so probably I think so. Definitely from when I was in middle school, I definitely was, auditioning for things and considering myself an actor or a future film person.
You're originally from Santa Cruz?
No, I was born in Santa Cruz, but I grew up in Olympia, Washington.
Oh, okay. Because I'm from San Mateo, so I spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz back in the day. Did you?
No, I never really spent much time there. It was when I used to tour with my band. We always wanted to play there, but it's a tough little town to book, kind of like Olympia. Seems like it's like a very locals and national act scene, and the regional touring thing seemed to be pretty log jammed.
Yeah, very small town like. They are very similar now that I think of it. So, what instruments do you play?
Guitar, piano, bass, some trumpet.
Wow.
I can sort of feel my way through a few other things if I need to for a session, but not like I could go out and play. And even like a piano, if I have parts to play, I could play it, but you can't just throw me in front of a piano and put me up in front of an audience and be able to put on a show.
Right. Really,
for me, that's guitar, vocals, and some bass would be my performing capacities.
So you started playing in bands really young and stuff?
Yeah, in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you do theater in high school?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I went to I did a little bit of theater before high school, but then once I was in high school, I did a lot. I acted in things, I wrote things, I directed things. Became a bit of a passion.
And did you move to LA right out of high school?
Yeah, right out of high school, which turned out to be probably a good move. I mean, well, I guess, you never know the road not taken, but I think it turned out to be a good move.
Okay, I've got 3 movies and 2 TV guest stars that I want to ask you about before we get into Radio 8 Ball and the Sync movies we were talking about last night and stuff. Your first movie was my favorite cult movie, Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-o-Rama. And I used to watch this movie on USA Up All Night when I was a kid. How did you get the role of Calvin?
Just auditioning. I remember it was pretty cool because I remember when I went to the audition, Jeffrey Combs was there in the waiting room, and he was it was a big inspiration. His performance in Reanimator was one of those like aha moments as an actor. Like, wow, I've never seen anything like that, and I'd like to aspire to that. So running into him in the offices is pretty cool, and then I got the part. Dave Dakota still likes to brag about how he discovered me. So there you go.
Yeah, I met David last year at Sun and Monster Palooza. Very nice guy, a little shy, but he signed my Blu-ray cover. He's cool. Wow.
And it's funny, I've always pronounced it, it's like, I've always called him Dave Dakota, but it's Dave Dakota.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Dave.
Yeah, everybody mispronounces his name, I've found. But, wow, I wonder what Jeffrey Combs would have played in that movie.
I don't know if he was auditioning for that. I think he was just there for another thing. I don't think he was auditioning for Sorority Babes.
I see. Now, Brink, Linnea, and Michelle are in the movie, and of course, they are just hotties, and they went on to make other movies together and stuff. Were they great to work with?
Oh, yeah. They were all great. And don't forget Robin Spilley.
Yeah.
Who is no longer with us, but was really just incredibly charismatic on that film.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How long did the movie take to make?
I think we were only there for like 2 weeks, if that.
Mm-hmm.
We shot it down in San Pedro, California, and it was my first lead, first real full film production. It was still pretty low budget. I mean, I remember for a while I was sharing a room with the PA,
mm-hmm.
Who was doing the food, and that was so like I was living with all the potato chips and Doritos bags, and I remember I ended up having to switch rooms because it would just be, when I was going to sleep, they'd be in there, crinkling bags. I was like, oh, I gotta sleep, man. Can I get another room? So
yeah,
but it was good. It was definitely a fun experience hanging out in that bowling alley. I remember the guy who ran the bowling alley made his own brandy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember drinking homemade brandy, and yeah, good times.
Because it was your first movie and you were the lead, were you under any pressure?
I didn't feel any particular pressure. It's not like, it's not like I think the film certainly surpassed what we expected of it in terms of its impact. I think we all kind of thought it was a pretty low-budget film that most people weren't going to see. We didn't even have the compelling title. It was at the time was called The Imp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm sure I felt a little bit of pressure, but I didn't feel like it was asking something terribly much of me as an actor more than I had.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was hubris on my part, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever been on a set where I felt a ton of pressure. My feeling is if you get the role, then you're probably the right guy for the role.
Right. Absolutely, I agree with that totally. when you go to conventions, do fans ever ask you to sign anything from that movie?
Yeah, and more so now since the Blu-ray came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got.
For a long time, the versions of it were pretty crappy prints, and so I think having a nicer print definitely has increased enthusiasm around the film.
Yeah, I love that Blu-ray. I got a copy of it, and it's signed by Linnea and David and Charlie Band. It's pretty cool. So I've got 5 questions about Nightmare on Elm Street 4. If you've been asked a million times about any of these, I apologize. But like I said, I try to ask, unique questions about stuff. Do you really know karate like Rick does?
No. That was all just. They sent me to some classes, but then when I showed up and tried to do what I'd learned in class on the set, they were like, "Nah, can you just give us some big roundhouse punches? They look better for a film." So it was a lot more. I don't know. When I was a kid, I was really into the Rocky movies, so it was a lot more Rocky than Bruce Lee.
Yeah. Did you have a crush on any of the girls in the movie?
Well, Tuesday and I were going out, so we were coupled through the whole filming.
Oh yeah,
I guess from about a week into the filming.
Oh yeah, I think she told me that when I interviewed her the first time. Actually, yeah. Is it true though that all the teenage actors in the movies at the time didn't get along?
No, that's not true at all. That's unfortunately, I think that's something that the people who made Never Sleep Again tried to manufacture with editing.
Yeah.
If you talk to, recently I've had reasons to hang out with a bunch of my castmates. We were talking about that, and a lot of us who were like, that we'd talk for 10 minutes about something, and then they take the one quote that sort of sounded, I think particularly Tuesday got a bad rap in that film, and it was really unfair.
Yeah.
Because she's great, and I don't remember there being any, if there was any drama, it was more from our director.
Mm-hmm.
Who, at least from my standpoint, I don't know, it seemed like he he didn't like having me around when Tuesday was around, so he would do things to try and keep me out of the picture, not out of the film, but, I think he had eyes for Tuesday and was kind of weird, and, that made him treat me in a different way. But even that, I wasn't even really so much aware of until after the fact, because I was just sort of focused on my thing.
Mm-hmm. Were you satisfied with your death scene?
I was, yeah. Again, that's another thing in Never Sleep Again. Really confusing to me why you would crash your own film. But, Rachel and Rennie both have, negative things to say about the death scene. To me, if you read Mick Strawn's book, I like his take on it better, and just that they ran out of budget and weren't able to do the fancy special effects thing they did, and then I ended up, basically doing it all with acting. I'm pretty proud of the fact that my death scene is all acting and no really very, very little special effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good death scene. I like it.
Plus I have my coming out of the coffin thing and the meatball stuff, so I got lots of death scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, that meatball scene. Yeah, I couldn't eat pizza with meatballs on it for like the longest time. And I was a kid when I saw it. It's okay. I've been over it for quite a while. Now I know a lot of the people from the franchise have had stalkers. Have you had any?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had a few. Also, I live in a small town, so, like, you know, it's just weird. Like, I definitely have people who have fixated on me in an unhealthy way, and, you know, it's sort of like famous enough to have stalkers, not famous enough to have bodyguards kind of thing. So,
yeah.
it's been complicated occasionally. I think I've gotten better at navigating it, but when it happens, you just never know what it's going to turn into.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it is what it is, you know. I also get to go to conventions and get paid to sign people's posters, so it's a weird gig in your life, but, you know, I guess every gig is a weird gig.
Yeah.
Has its oddities and benefits.
Certainly. Then you worked with a powerhouse cast in Far From Home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a real treat. I guess if I thought, you know, and funny, maybe I felt a little bit more pressure with that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really like it was a role I could do. I mean, all of them, you know, as an actor, as a film actor, you always sort of feel like, I wish I could go back, I could always do it better. But then as you get older and you look back on it, you're like, oh, no, that was pretty good for where I was. But yeah, the cast on that was amazing. Matt Frewer and Dick Miller and
Richard Mazur.
And obviously Drew and Anthony. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Tilly. I mean, wow, that's just an amazing cast. So that was a good experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we shot that in Gerlach, Nevada, which is where Burning Man is now. We were there. Mm-hmm. I think that was the last summer that that area hasn't been overrun with, you know, hundreds of thousands of desert hippies. No offense, I don't say that as a pejorative. Desert hippies are great, but
yeah. It's
kind of cool to have, you know, been able to be on the salt flats at that time of year and have it all to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was a kid, I saw you play a mean bully on what we know now as Saved by the Bell, but it was called Good Morning Miss Bliss back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what was that like?
Well, I mean, no one knew that it was going to turn into, again, this sort of a recurring theme, just like with Sorority Babes and like with Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, there was really not the sense of that it was going to turn into this major, you know, cultural touchstone. At the time, I was really impressed with Dustin Diamond. He was really, really a talented kid, had a ton of charisma.
Yep.
I think, sort of sadly, he was like a lot of Disney kids who, I don't know, learned bad acting for that style of TV show. I mean, They want sort of this really over-the-top kind of demonstrative acting, and I wonder what he would have turned into if he had a different career trajectory. But I was really impressed with them, and of course, getting to work with Hayley Mills was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. She's a Disney legend, you know?
She's just a legend, really. But yes, yeah, Disney legend as well. You know, because she comes from a real rich, dramatic family in England.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, John Mills is her father.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you did an episode of Alien Nation. Was that a good experience?
That kind of just flew by. I was kind of playing a creep. The best part of it was I got to shoot something at Griffith Park Observatory where they shot Rebel Without a Cause, and that James Dean was also a really big inspiration for me as an actor. So getting to film a scene at the Griffith Park Observatory was pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, Lee Bryant was in that episode as well. I had her on here a couple weeks ago. Very nice lady. Good actress. So, how did you conceive the idea for Radio 8 Ball?
Well, I've always been into synchronicity, and at the time, I'd play different games with the scan button on the radio, or playing CDs on shuffle function, and seeing what they would, how they would realign. I remember when They Might Be Giants put out the album, I think it was Apollo 18.
Mm-hmm.
They had this song at the end called Fingertips. That's like 12 or 13 or 15, something like that. Just little song snippets. Mm-hmm. But instead of having it be one like 4-minute song with all these song snippets, all the song snippets were their own ID, so that if you played the CD on shuffle function, they would just show up for like little, like 3 seconds. I heard a sound, I turned around to see the thing that made the sound, and then it would move on. And so I was kind of into the whole shuffle factor of CDs when they were just coming on the scene. Mm-hmm. And then I had an opportunity to do a radio show at a local radio station in Olympia. And I, at first, was just going to play, me and my co-host were just going to play CDs on shuffle function. Mm-hmm. And it was called the Pirate Shuffle. We were going to be playing like bootlegs on shuffle. But then we started having all these crazy synchronicities where we'd play a track and it would relate very specifically to things we had just been discussing on the air. And then that led to us asking questions to it, and then to people calling in, and it just sort of organically evolved. And, 20 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow, so you've been doing it 20 years now.
Yeah, we started in 98 and did it for 10 years on terrestrial radio. And then I did it for another 5 years as a live theatrical production, and then since then I've been developing it as an app and as a podcast, and potentially as some sort of TV show if it ever gets there.
Wow, yeah, I watched some clips of it last night. It seems like you have this really unique mixture of like a radio show / podcast and a live audience music show, and I think that's brilliant. It's like a variety show in a way.
Well, yeah, I should probably explain. Like, the basic format is that we answer questions by picking songs at random and then interpreting them like musical tarot cards. And the questions come from our audience and from celebrity guests, like we've had Viggo Mortensen and John C. Reilly and Patricia Arquette and Seth Green, and on and on and on and on. And then we've featured some of my favorite musicians, local people, regional people, and some major sort of national artists like Andras Jones or John Auer of the Posies, Dan Byrne, Ricky Lee Jones, and on and on and
on. Do you have any particular favorite guests you've had?
There's just so many. In the last year, I hesitate to single any of them out because I'm going to always end up leaving someone out. We've been doing the show for 20 years. But in the last year, we've had some really great ones. Like I said, we had Nara George and Eleni Mandel, a great band recently on called the Essex Green. Some bands that people might not know, but I'm really impressed with a band called Feisty Heart, and another one out of the Bay Area called Myrna, Mark Davenport, Miranda Lee Richards. I could just go on and on. They're all pretty impressive to me.
How about, have you had any trouble getting guests on?
Like with Viggo, it took him. We were in this film called Tripwire back in 1990.
Right.
And at the time, he didn't have an agent, and I introduced him to my agent, who is still his manager. So I had a line to him, but he's a very busy guy. When he's when he's in a role, he's, you know, the guy doesn't do social media. He doesn't live in Hollywood. And when he's working on a role, he's just in it for months and months, you know, even sometimes a year or more at a time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I tend to be patient and dogged in the pursuit of the people I want, and he's someone I wanted to have on the show for a long time, and so it probably took 7 or 8 or more years of asking, and until the time was right. So like they're all hard to get until the timing is right, and then they're easy to get.
Mm-hmm. Did it take a while to find an audience?
It's taken, you know, there's still a lot of people out there who don't know it. So, you know, we're always, it's a constant process. I certainly hope people who listen to this will check it out and subscribe to us on either iTunes or on Spotify or Google Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. We come out with a daily, right now it comes out as a daily podcast, which means every day a question from one of our celebrity guests with a randomly chosen song as an answer, and then our interpretation, and they're about 20 minutes each. At this moment right now, we're still in a month-long hiatus, but there are about 350 individual podcasts up currently, and we'll be starting back up in November and have stuff in the can already through February. So a lot of content there, and at the center of each one of them is a great song from one of our musical guests. So I'm pretty proud of it. I've been able to be involved in a lot of things, but Radio 8 Ball carries the most inspiration for me.
Oh,
that and maybe playing music. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. How many days a week, though, on average, do you do the show?
Well, we record anywhere from 4 to 5 shows a month. Mm-hmm. But every day one comes out. So I'm always either booking or editing or producing them.
Nice. And it's the standard people have to I'm trying to think. Send away for tickets to be in the audience?
Well, we haven't really. We've been mostly focusing on the studio for the last year. I'd love to get back into doing live shows with audiences, but right now just doing the podcast in the studio with bands and our celebrity guests is taking up all my time. So, but we'll bring it back out to live audiences probably in the next year or so.
Oh, cool. So last night you were telling me about sync movies, and I found it pretty fascinating. Can you tell my audience what sync movies are?
Yeah, so there's a field of study and I guess artistic creation, which falls under the moniker of synchronistic arts or sync arts, SYNC, short for synchronicity. Mm-hmm. And so Radio 8 Ball would be an example of a sync art project. It's the whole idea of asking a question and then randomly picking a song as an answer and then interpreting it is about engaging synchronicity and using that as a divination tool. But another kind of sync art is what you're asking about is sync films, and one genre or branch of that involves one is something that your listeners are probably going to be familiar with, which is like the idea of like what they did with Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon, where you take a film and you take another, like an album that isn't related to the film, and play the album
right,
starting where the movie starts, and see synchronicities that emerge.
Right.
There's some. It's sort of like they all work, but some of them really work, like blow your mind kind of ways. Like one of my favorites is taking the White Album and playing it over Rosemary's Baby. Just phenomenal synchronicities. And there's just a lot of historical synchronicity there. Like the Rosemary's Baby takes place in the Dakota where John Lennon lived, and Mia Farrow and her sister were in Rishikesh with the Beatles when they were writing the White Album. And of course, Manson killed Polanski's wife, inspired by the White Album. So there's all this, there's all these sort of natural synchronicities there that make that a pretty compelling watch. So that's that's another kind of sync film, but this is a long way of going around to getting to the kind that we were talking about, which is where they'll follow an individual actor and notice how certain archetypal symbols will show up over and over again in their work in ways that were most likely not planned by the actor. So, like Jim Carrey will show up with a lot of dogs and moon imagery, and those are both images that are on the Fool card and the tarot. And so Jim Carrey resonates, at least in the world of sync film, as sort of a walking version of the Fool card. And they've done, if you look it up, you'll find films like this about Jennifer Aniston or Christopher Lloyd or Kurt Russell. Like there's this synchronicity where Kurt Russell, as Snake Plissken, lands on the Twin Towers in Escape from New York, and then he's also the first guy to walk through the Stargate in the film Stargate, and when he comes out of the towers, when he comes out of the Stargate, the first thing he sees are these two pyramids that, again, in the realm of synchronicity, resonate with the towers. So these are the kind of archetypal resonances that sync films will explore. And then the reason I was mentioning it to you was because there's a sync filmmaker named Will Morgan, who made a series of these about me, following the archetypes that follow me. And I think what he found particularly compelling about that was, most of the people they focus on this are people who have a certain amount of, they're movie stars, so they have a certain amount of control over the films that they're doing. They're not just accepting the role that they're offered. They have a stack of scripts, and they might be drawn toward certain style of film or certain style of director. Maybe certain images speak to them. But for me, an actor who has a pretty haphazard and accidental film career, to see multiple archetypes, whether I think the three that he really focuses in on are the idea of the archetype of the red-headed woman, and the archetype of the mirror, which he also connects with mirrors and TV screens, and then the idea of magicians and teachers. And that all of these three, sort of symbols tend to follow me in films in ways that are, surprising when you line them up. And speaks to the idea that there is something going on here in a feedback loop way between the way cinema as a medium reflects the archetypes of humanity, and how certain resonances will attach themselves to a certain actor.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's the longest I've talked in this interview, but I highly recommend people who are interested. There's a website called thesyncbook.com, and they have a publishing house that put out my book, Accidental Initiations, and a lot of the people who work with synchronicity have at one point or other posted something on one of their podcasts or on their film site. So it's worth checking out.
Yeah. How did you become aware of all this?
Well, synchronicity, really. I guess also, if you're out there hosting a synchronicity podcast, the people who are interested in that phenomenon will track you down. I remember I was working in a bar as a bartender in Seattle at the time, and someone, one of the people who was, I don't know, one of the founding members of that group tracked me down and wanted to talk about it, and then we, if you're into, it's like anything, if you're into something obscure and you meet other people who are into that thing, you become quick friends.
Yeah. I remember about 12 years ago or so, I first found out about the Wizard of Oz and the Dark Side of the Moon thing, right? I didn't have the album Dark Side of the Moon, but I had Pink Floyd's Greatest Hits. So I put on one of the songs, and I put the Wizard of Oz on in one of the moments that I was reading off of the internet. It was so eerie, man. I mean, I felt like I played a record backwards,
Yeah. Yeah. That is the nature of synchronicity. You gaze into the abyss, and the abyss gazes back into you.
Yeah, it's like playing a record backwards, or like talking to a Ouija board. I mean, it's eerie. But yeah, I was looking for that. I was looking for that stuff last night. I had forgotten. I knew you mentioned the guy's name was Morgan, but I had forgotten his first name was Will, so I couldn't find it last night. But I will check it out.
Yeah, you can find those, at least the trilogy that he made about me, you can find them on my IMDb page.
Yeah, I was looking on the page. I couldn't find it for some reason, but I'll look again and stuff. Do you have any upcoming projects or convention appearances you want to plug?
Let's see. Well, I'm going to be in Dortmund, Germany, in the first weekend in November with Robert and Dan Hassel, and Tuesday night in Hoy Newkirk.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be fun. And there's a project, I can't really say exactly what it is, but there's a film project that I co-wrote with a guy named Mark Morgenstern, and if all goes well, we'll be bringing together all of the principal players from Nightmare 4, including Rodney and Ken from 3, as actors in this new project, and it's pretty exciting. If it happens, it'll be very cool, and we'll be announcing it probably in 2019 sometime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys are doing a lot of 30th stuff this year for the movie. I was talking to Brooke Thies a few weeks ago, and she said she's wondered why she hasn't been invited, and that is pretty weird. I mean, her death in the scene is probably the one that everyone remembers the most in that particular movie,
Oh yeah, the cockroach is a big deal. I think that has more to do just with reps and people who the agents are on for cons. And from my understanding, and I'm not exactly sure, but that is being worked out, and I think she's going to be attending a lot more of them in the future.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I've met her in person. She's such a nice lady. And I was at when you guys were at Monsterpalooza in Pasadena last year. I was there, and I met all the ladies first, and then I was going to get to the guys. I didn't get to meet you because the place just got insane. That room you guys they put you in, it just got insane. So I left after that.
Yeah, I had to leave early. I remember I had to leave early for that one. And Dan I think his wife was having a baby that weekend. So, yeah, the guys were we were less available than we are at most cons.
Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, Ricky was the only one there first, and then they said that you guys were going to be late or something like that. Yeah, now that I remember it. Well,
yeah, because Ricky got himself a hotel room. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's a smooth operator, that Ricky Dean Logan.
Absolutely. Well, Andros, I appreciate your time, man, and I thank you so much. And hope I get to meet you at a convention or something in the future.
Sure. Oh, and one thing, I probably should have done this at the beginning, but it's actually pronounced Andras.
Andros. Okay, because I thought I called you Andros last night, and then you corrected me. It was Andros.
No, I would never do such a thing. But, I was probably drunk, so who knows?
Okay, so it's Andros.
That is correct. Andras Jones.
Okay, well, I'll pronounce it during my outro here, but in the intro, it's probably mispronounced. So I apologize for that.
Okay. As long as they make it to the end, they'll get it right.
Okay. You have yourself a great night.
Thanks a lot, and have a great spooky Halloween.
I sure will. Happy Halloween to you too.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye. Well, there you have it. Andras Jones. Ain't he a cool dude? Thank you so much, Andras. You're a very smart, insightful guy, and you got some great stories there. And it was an honor to interview you. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes!